Christopher Hall. Hello, sir.
Nice
to see you.
How are you,
Here
sir?
we are again. Here we are again. Our Sunday pajama raw Hawkman session.
You got Nike pajamas too.
I have, man. I've got my Nike and I've got my hoodie. This is because what I'm doing is social distancing, but nighttime I double as Assassin's Creed just to get some freaking air there, right? So if you see somebody running around Melbourne suburbs looking a bit like this with a shiny blue Nike hoodie, then it'll be me doing my Assassin's Creed social distancing play.
I was really impressed. I just thought it was peak performance nightwear. I thought he really takes his sleep seriously. Yeah,
I am taking this seriously. Now, I have to say, it's been an interesting week. This is our Raw sessions. We don't, as you know, for those that are kind of watching this for the first time, Chris and I do two. We do the Sunday ones a little bit raw, and we just share the week, and it plans to see for a more polished version on Tuesday. I'll get to me in a minute because it's been a really interesting week. But how's your week been, Mr. Hall?
I was already having a hell of a week in the early part of the week, but just having a quick chat to you before. So I've got this dicky ankle. It's an old injury that kind of back of mind rather than front of mind. So about 4 years back, I got told I needed surgery on it, and one of those things at the time I was traveling way too much. So going between Melbourne and New York, and it wasn't an option because it's going to take me off my feet for 6 to 8 weeks. So I just kept on pushing it back, and it's always there. Like when I sort of go up steps, I'll lose stability, and it kind of reminds me every now and then. But then, I had a little tumble, and when I say little, it was ankle sort of sideways, and that crunch of cartilage that's such a unique sound that nothing else in the world sounds like it. And I knew I'd done something wrong. And my ankle right now looks like it's about the same size as my thigh. So it looks like a little happy sack with kind of 5 marbles at the end. It's not looking too good. Yeah.
Chris Hall, the knacker in your foot. But as we said, you know what? It's a good sign from the universe because you would have let it anyway. You would have let it go. So if there's going to be a time to get it sorted, this is a good time because from the recovery, 6 to 8 weeks, then by all accounts, if you're listening to the early signs of optimism that we're seeing in the news this week, then that's pretty much bang on time for when things are starting to go reverse down. So it's a good time to get it sorted as well in some ways, right?
The only part that's killing me, and this is what I was saying, that if I'm a little bit incoherent this evening, you'll know why. These things are the only way that I can kind of push through the pain. But I've learned again, I hate painkillers. I just kind of feel that the end of all my ideas just fizzle out to mush. I almost feel like a watercolor. It's rather than it zapping together, it just kind of this healthy glow that sits off in the distance that, I don't enjoy the feeling. I really don't.
But, no, I get it. And you feel like it plays with the Chris Hall Hawkman magic touch as well, right? That's right. Now, tell me though as well, you said as well the start of the week. So what was going on? You said already at the start of the week. I know it was already, I don't know what was going on at the start of the week as well.
Keeping pace at the moment. It's just, I touched last week on the dangers of doing back to back to back and not being able to actually offer your all in every conversation when you're doing that. So I kind of changed the pace a little bit in terms of bringing the breaks in. But what I was then finding was there just wasn't enough hours in the day to be able to achieve everything that I wanted to achieve. So I've got to play around with that formula a bit more of trying to make sure I've got time in between to be able to actually do productive work, but then enough face time to be able to sort of keep that balance right. So
it makes me think, Chris, actually, and maybe there's something here. I've had the same, but I think by necessity, I've found, we definitely talked about this, I found myself working almost like, say, 4 times harder at times, like doing so much more. But you can only do so much at once. I think that's part of the learning is we've got to still be kind to ourselves and understand that we'll get there, but you might not get there as quick as you want to with the volume you've got to do. Because that back-to-back pace and breakneck, well, in your case, break ankle pace doesn't work, right? Breakneck pace, break ankle pace, it doesn't work. That's another learning right there. It's the world telling you time to slow down a bit, and you can't do everything in one go. You gotta take it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So what about your week? How's it panned out for you?
And I'll share. I shared a weird week as well. Like, if we rewind this whole thing, I got straight into, okay, how do we build the new world and not worry too much about the support and all that sort of stuff. But I had a really difficult early part of the week, and a couple of things came up. So one was, I'm in one of these industries that's kind of been crippled quite substantially. No live events. You've got to pivot fully, move to online. Market's not quite ready, although good signs of that, which I'll talk to maybe after. But then simultaneously, there's things I've moved to later in the year that suddenly creep in, and now contractual obligations kick in 4 months earlier than I'm thinking. I think I've kind of put it on ice. It resurges back up. So now that's a shock to the system. It's adding levels of stress onto what is already quite overwhelming at times. And then I got caught off guard as well, because something happened for me this week, which on any other day of, when I say normal world, just things operating. It would have been a pinnacle day of my career, and I'll be celebrating. And I just got caught off guard because I'm sitting alone with this thing, this achievement. And I suddenly have this stark realization of, who do I actually celebrate with? And it sounds so ridiculous maybe for some people, but it wasn't, not because we're in isolation alone, but it actually shared a bigger realization for me in my broader world, which is, who do I really celebrate that with? I connect with a lot of people in my job, my day job, but in the last few years, I think it's fair to say I try and keep a little private from that. Who I am, and I'm very social, and I'll make myself very free and available. But at the same time, I've become, as we all should, I deserve my privacy too. And I just had this realization, who do I actually share these wins with? And I think it was just a culmination of all that, just caught me off guard. And I had a really rough couple of days, mate. And on that note, so what I did do though, is I don't really post much on social. I share media stories and stuff. And I've been through this process the last few months. I know we've spoken about this, where I've been deliberately, culling's the wrong word, but I've been pulling down my social access to people. Not because there's any malice, it's just I need more privacy, because I was getting bombarded or spammed, and you've got to earn that right. Or if you're not in my world, you know what I mean? It's like, who's really in my world? Who phones me? Who do I talk to? Not just, hey, you've met me at a gig. So I've been pulling down the numbers of that so that I can be a little bit more freely expressed at times. But what was really nice was, I put up this post just to download for 5 minutes, and the number of people that actually got in touch with me on the back of that was really quite nice. And one of them, Rachel, who's part of my gratitude for this week, which I'm sure we'll get to, she actually made a really good point. She said, made her stop and realize that there's people that in your circle, and for her, I was clearly one of them, you think, they're just always like bulletproof, 7-foot tall, bulletproof, nothing ever bothers them. And that's, for me, I'd say I just get on with things. But we're all human. And we all have moments, and we all need a bit of pick me up at times, and so it was an interesting week, mate, where I definitely got to show a bit of vulnerability, and people in my circle got to see a little bit of that live this week for sure.
It's funny actually, because I know last week we were talking about that meditation piece, and as you know, I sort of we're working with startups, sort of offer a lot of guidance and a lot of sort of ideas on ways they can cope with different stages of kind of working through the challenges of starting a new business. And there's always one area, excuse me, that I've been reluctant to kind of touch on, and it's a technique that I've found works well for me, but I recognize that it could potentially be dangerous to others. But when we were touching on that meditation side, the technique that works for me is actually, and it started off with a reading out of a book, but it was this idea that I sort of enter myself into almost that textbook cliche picture of a universe. Yeah. So you've got stars, you've kind of got the the galaxies, and I picture them as being sort of energy forces, and I'm an equal part energy force to that. So it kind of positions me in that first early stage of meditation, just to be kind of connected and at one with everything. But then in that process, I kind of then get to a point where if I can see everything as equal energy sources around me, there's then that emotional intelligence to then recognize the emotions that I'm feeling. And I've taken that one step further into then making those emotions a energy source that's separate of me. So if you can imagine for a moment that I'm sitting there And if I'm feeling failure, I will see that as an energy source that exists in front of me, but I am not failure. I might
Correct,
feel
yeah.
anger, but I'm not
Yeah.
angry. I might
Yes.
feel loneliness, but I'm not necessarily lonely. So I kind of
Yes.
I try and separate these things in a way that
Yeah.
I see them and appreciate the fact that they exist, but they're
Yeah.
not me. They are a different energy source to me.
Yeah.
And I say it's dangerous because taken down the wrong path, you then start to disassociate
Well,
emotions and
exactly. And
yeah.
I think coming to your point there, it's dangerous in the sense. I mean, I do a lot of similar things when you're describing, and most of the time, you know, those it's going with the flow, right? And recognizing what is, accepting what is, but not getting attached to what is, and not letting it disrupt your equilibrium, and being grateful for what is, right? But not using what is and the evidence of what your world is to recreate and go, well, that's what it's always going to be. Yep. It's like, what's the learning here and then going forward? But I like what you say in terms of like any of these things, like deep meditations and lots of these things from the ethereal, right? It's a bit like an AK-47. It's a great, powerful weapon, but in the hands of a child, it can be very dangerous. In the hands of somebody not trained, it can be very dangerous. That's what I get a sense when you say that. It's true for any of these things. Say for behavioral sciences, tools of profiling and all the rest of it, same thing. You know, people can find this stuff online, but any of these tools, any of what you're describing there in the wrong hands or not used in the way it's designed can backfire. Yeah? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I found that certainly with my kids, yeah, trying to explain some complex ideas to them and trying to not get into spirituality too much. But, you know, just it's really interesting sometimes with complex ideas, the contradicting ideas that can exist within one thought as well. So even just that idea of empowerment. So, and that's ultimately what that's doing is if you can separate yourself from the emotion to realize that it's something I'm experiencing, but it doesn't necessarily represent me, it's empowering. And that empowerment can then also give you that strength to carry into almost that control mechanism of things that are going on around you.
Yeah.
But if you look at something as simple as creativity, which is the essence of life, you cannot have creativity and control exist in the same world. Because in order to create, you need to let go of control. So at every point, you end up with these contradicting ideas that, the balance again between those is where the
I would say, so what you're describing, so you said there about meditation. I've been big on that for years, going back to even before I lived in Australia. But back then, the world wasn't ready for that. You know, corporates weren't. And now it's a mainstream conversation where C-suites, execs are talking about their meditation practices, right? You didn't get that as openly 10 years ago. Certainly not 18 years ago when I was on that. So I've always been a bit of a ninja and kind of blended it with my session, but subtly. So it's not freaky because you kind of got that mid-zone of people that will, if it's too much, they'll freak out and go, what's this, right? It's too out there. It's too woo-woo. Whereas now more people are being accepting of those things. You know, you'd rewind 30, 40 years ago, some of the modalities, even in health, would have been cast aside. Now you look at insurance companies, they blended more of them in as you can claim for them. You know, 20 years ago, you couldn't claim for half of these modalities. Now they're more mainstream. So more of this is coming into mainstream. But there is a dance when you go into businesses I've found for years, and that is still find the relevance without making it too out there. All right. And when you said there, creativity, you're right, because without creativity, nothing is formed. But for people that, you know, going into those really deep space of creativity that like control, as you say, it might be a bit freaky to go there. So it's just finding a balance, how you position it. It's easier now, don't you think, than it was several years ago?
Well, I think the other danger point inside of that too is there is a distinct difference between taking action and faking action. And if you tend to be one of those people who thinks everything through, you start to convince yourself that you're actually taking action and you're faking action, because at some point you need to start doing that stuff in the real world. You know, you can think and think and think and think and think it, and it becomes so real to you that you start to believe that you are actually doing these things. But actually taking action and faking action can be a trap a lot of people fall into as well.
In the same way that saying things about yourself aloud, you drip it on your subconscious, you start to believe it about yourself, which is why we've got, we're talking before entrepreneurs, right? The fakers, as I would call in one of my articles, the candy floss economy of empty substance, right? We got a world full of that. So you're right. Overthinking, though, this is my take on that. I was doing a talk probably after I did my first book. I remember doing a talk, a presentation somewhere. It just kind of flashed where somebody asked or said something about overthinking. I went, here's my second book. It's called Overthinking. Overthinking kills everything. The end. That's the end of the book. That's the total book. Because it does. Because it does, right? Yeah. And like you're saying there, if we're overthinking, we almost think we're taking action by thinking. No, at some point we got to actually get in and do, right? Yeah. Anyway, here's another question for you now. What about this week? Have you noticed any shifts in terms of the conversations you're having now? What's the general mood, feeling? Any adaptations or things you want to share from a business perspective this week?
An interesting one for you, maybe. We had our we do these fortnightly webinars, the Business Essential webinars, so specifically targeted at businesses struggling through this current sort of COVID-19 crisis. Sorry, I said the C word.
You're the one who keeps saying the C word.
I'm going to blame the tablets. But the businesses that are currently sort of struggling through that stage, we do these business essentials, and they are exactly that. They're just revisiting all these ideas and proactive tools that they can use within their business. And it was interesting because we kind of touched on that piece we were talking about last Tuesday around available software and what to use there. And we ran a survey at the end of it. So keeping in mind, when we run these webinars, you get a mixed bag of lollies in regards to who attends these kind of things. So this was titled Going Digital, but we had people there who were still reluctant to jump from their old Nokia into smartphones, and others who were running a full e-commerce store, shipping overseas, and big social media presence. So you've got to kind of apply an assumption base on learning, but then offer some value to those above. So we made it very broad in the themes that we're talking about, but kind of took a deep dive into just some of those a little bit further. At the end of it, the survey that we ran, we wanted to get an idea of follow-up sessions and what people would be really interested in doing the most. And my assumption was that the area of digital marketing and online presence, e-commerce store, website optimization, all of these questions that people tend to be front of mind on would actually be number one on that survey. Surprisingly, they were down the bottom. The top two was people were wanting to have a course on software for productivity, personal productivity, and software on business efficiency, and how they can actually leverage some of these tools for that. And I thought that was a really interesting insight because, again, ask people, they'll tell you, these are the things that I need to do for my business. It's very mechanical. It's very logical. Set up somewhere I can transact. I can offer something. I can do something. I can have a presence. But behind all that, the things that they're really struggling with is actually coming back to that personal level of how do I manage these ideas? How do I run a simple to-do list? How do I do these things that are the base level of productivity, making things happen, regardless of what those things are? If you don't have those things in place, again, neither of them work. So I found that really interesting to get that insight. Yeah.
Well, on that note, though, and I know that's why we'd already planted the seed that we're definitely going to do a extended series with a tech focus for our more polished Tuesdays. And we're definitely going to continue that theme for this Tuesday. So I'll wrap up with that and plant the seed and tell people, but that's definitely going to be part of that for Tuesday. I'll share a couple from this week from my side, definitely a couple observations. I found that there's definitely a greater sense of optimism to some degree happening and emerging. And I can talk to that specifically to some realm with my field, meaning that event and space. There's a couple of conferences now that are being put off or whatever weren't going to happen. Now they are, and they're going to happen as virtual conferences this year. And the organizers are getting quite excited at the possibility versus 2 months ago, it was like, damn, we're going to have to run this next year, So there's definitely now, it's not fully there, but certainly for my space, you can see it's nudging open. People are now taking their focus more to what we can do, what we need to do, where can we go, instead of just stuck in the quagmire. So I think that's really, it's early signs, more positive than it has been for a while.
I'm curious and question without notice, but I mean, you've run and sat in now on a few of these sort of webinars and events that have carried over into digital, and you've seen the unsuccessful ones, and you've been part of some successful ones. I still find it interesting, the touched on before, energy, but that energy level that you get in being in a room with other people and learning together, I think is something that works really well in a live environment, because speakers also feed off that energy. And you could probably touch on that further, but I think I find that interesting. Are you seeing that come through at all?
Actually, it's interesting you should ask that. Like, bizarre, because this is definitely a conversation I've been having actually with ICMI, my agents, and it's a world they're really realizing now. Digital, you could have some people that are so accustomed to that live audience, but they don't translate that well into digital. It's just a fact. And we've talked about this. You've been on some of them, you see them as well. And that's, the whole emergence into here is you've got to then lift this up a notch and still find ways to make that social connection and the wow factor. And it's not as easy as just turn up and be a talking head, right? That's the problem, is that people race to this, and now they're just talking heads. We're in a Zoom like we're talking heads tonight to some degree. But when we're doing, like, certainly the conference I'm doing, they're full on production. There's more production for me goes into the stuff I'm creating for my digital conferences than when I do it live. It's more time, more effort. You would have seen, I'm talking streaming footage that I'm doing live. There's visual. It's a full on production, but that's part of the art, is you got to understand it's not as just turn up and be the talking head. Now, and let's be frank, if you're a celeb and you're famous, then people are going to love the fact you drop in on their drinks on a Friday or something. That's great, right? But if you don't have a celebrity label or a big massive following, how do you then get that connection? That's where you got to really be mindful. It's more sophisticated than that. So one of the bodies of work certainly I'm starting to be asked about more and more now is this kind of train the trainer on getting up to speed with how do you create this environment where you can have better social connection and a better experience. And by the way, that's the art, because conversely, there's people out there that have got $300,000, $400,000 studios and every whiz bang piece of technology you can fathom, which looks great, but then they don't get the impact either, because it's not all about the tech either, right? That's the whole thing. So to do it well, it really is a blended of you dance with the best tech you can, and then you got to learn some basic and fundamentals around facilitation. And then you got to understand that it's not as simple as just doing what you would do on a live stage, and being self-aware, your energy and presence, as well as audience aware and energy onto the platform and tech. So there's quite a few things going on. Does that make sense, Chris? I think I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I'm just saying, because obviously there's two sides to that. Yeah, you're sort of taking that side as a view as a speaker. And somebody who then, again, feeds off that energy from the people there. But you've then also got the collective of people who are there as well. And I think they're learning through this process, well, where do I sit in? Am I simply just
correct?
Am I just sitting in and listening in on a conversation? Or
that's a great point. That's a great point. So I'd actually add to that. No, I'm describing it maybe right now delivery, but I'm actually fully aware of the end user experience, because there's certain things you do so that audience still feel connected with what's going on, so that they're not just a voyeur. Now, some of them want to be voyeurs, to be frank. And some of the clients I'm doing work with right now, it's finding a balance. They want to be part of it, but they don't want to be fully submersed. So then there's different ways you can do that. But yeah, you are looking at it from both sides, not just the delivery of what we think is going to work. You got to look at it from the other side as well. You got to consider both. But it is a new space, and it's not one that you can just take your normal live meeting, and even let's forget about speakers and presenters and polished stuff like that. You can't just take your normal meeting format even and drop it and be a talking head either. That may fall flat equally. I guess that's what I'm describing. There's certain things you got to be a bit smarter with this transference of energy in a different way, so that everybody feels connected. And there's some fundamental things you can do to get up to speed with that.
Again, without getting too spiritual on it, I do think there is something there about the physical transfer of energy in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, for sure.
So many conversations this week on on Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and people will turn around and say, "I can't wait for this to all be over so we can finally
Absolutely.
catch up again and sit and talk." And I kind of remind them, it's going to be this. It's the same conversations. I still see you.
Well, yes, it is and not. But you're right, though, because we are social beings and we're all going to rush back to that. And that's why we might have spoken about this on one of the other ones. Doors have definitely been nudged open. So take my field, every industry, but my field, virtual conferencing, doors are opened. They were already open. They've opened more aggressively and they're not getting shut. Yeah. But it's not going to be at the expense of all of a sudden lives gone. I mean, even for years, right? Digital's been massive for years. I know there's people that built massive digital audiences. In a world, I've got my own academy digitally, and yet 99% of my work has still been live. Yeah. So even though we've had digital access for years, it's not like everybody raced there fully for that. And we'll come back because there is a transference. We're social beings, we're real beings, and we do want that. So I agree with you that there are certain things that you can't fully replicate through this. That's just the way it is. But you can do some things better. Yeah.
One of the other courses we had a lot of interest in too was the using digital to scale, and I think that's going to be an important topic as we start to move off the restrictions. Is not just looking at digital being the answer for everything, but actually taking out just those little bits of your business that will be better to scale on a digital platform, but merging those with the real value that's there with that side as well.
That's one of the good things to show. It's like human beings in a digital era. We're starting to see that and feel that now. Like, whereas there has been a rush for tech stacks and let's tech it and let's get on tech and automate, make it quicker, make it faster, and patience, right, has just kicked in. This whole thing is teaching us actually more to balance and blend the tech we've got with the human interaction and stuff. And certainly some of the so this conference I said that's kicking in, that's exactly what the keynote is going to be on. That it's exactly that topic. That's going to be a hot topic, I think, for this year. Now, mindful of time, Chris, let's move on a bit so we don't get too labored. This raw session, I know we started something that you flagged, which I quite like, which is a bit of gratitude. Who have you got gratitude for this week, Mr. Chris Hall?
Well, I'll keep mine simple. There's so mentioned the webinar earlier, but there was we always dig deep into our community whenever we run these events. So get a whole bunch of people on board with the topic. So this week we had Amanda Wright, who actually touched on some of the work that she's been doing on digital literacy for those who are entering the job seeker market, and sort of just covered that whole piece of you kind of believe that kids entering the workforce these days would be a lot more digital literate than the older guys, but their digital literacy is confined to mobile devices and the apps that they use, not so much the other tools. So she covered a great piece on that. She did a great job. We also had Monica Singh. You met Monica actually up at our so Monica's doing some, yeah, so she's doing some great work with Worrell, which is a sort of online community. But as you might know, she's got this background piece on sort of website optimization and SEO. But talk through this idea that bricks and mortar store. There's certain things that and do. You know when customers walk in, where they're walking to. Let's say you've got a bookshop. You know which area they're reading books or looking at it. If they don't go to the counter and buy. Yet people aren't tracking those same things on their own website. And it was an eye-opener for me just to think of it in that context, that we tend not to think of that digital world as the same as bricks and mortar. But yeah, Monica did a fantastic job. And our go-to for all things social, Ryan Jenkins, I had a chat to him over the phone and said, mate, I'd love your input. And Ryan being Ryan, just wind him up and watch him go. He just dropped straight in on the call, ran this fantastic value piece around socials, and look, very much the feedback on his side was terrific. So I think those three a massive thank you to. And the final one, Dr. Patrick Burke, who is my doctor, who gave me a lecture. You've got to be cruel to be kind, basically just saying,
Tough love.
Chris, how busy is your life really that you can't have this surgery that we told you 4 years ago you need to do? Stop putting your priorities in the wrong spot, and actually realize your health is number one. And sometimes you've got to hear that, and sometimes you've got to hear it from someone like a doctor, just to kind of remind you that these things are important. So, Dr. Patrick Byrne, big thank you for changing my focus a little bit there.
You could probably thank your ankle as well for the crunching, clicking noise it made to start that whole journey, right? If we showed
my ankle's certainly not thanking me right now, so we've got a complex relationship. Yeah.
Nice. I had a few as well. So, like I said, I'm here at this download Tuesday, but what was really nice was, as I flagged, a few people got in touch with me on the back of that. I wasn't expecting, actually, to be frank, because I find digital. I don't know, for a while back there, I used to get a lot of trolls, but not really much from my friends. It was weird, I hear more from strangers and randoms than I do people in my network. So I want to call out a few of them. So firstly, Vicky, who I said thanks to last week, but Vicky Markov, my agent's just wonderful and phoning and doing a few things for me. Thank you. You're just lovely. The guys that I sent Janice Tennant, who I used to work with in Gatika in years. I mean, she saw that, but I haven't spoken to her for years. And she just messenger phones me out of the blue. And I'm like, we're straight into it, right? The same banter. And it was so easy. But I just thought it was lovely that she phoned Rachel Chambers. Yeah, she on messenger phone book. Yeah, she didn't just message. She went, oh, Blagger, I've got a phone. Check in. It was so nice.
Wow.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. But that's that environment anyway, I think. So and on that note, some more of my old friends from Kentucky world. Nick Rohn, actually, in fact, makes me think. Nick messaged me, sent me a nice message, and he actually said, you know what, Mark, I'm one of these people that this is the gist. I'm one of these people, I kind of see a lot of what you do, but from afar. I never really say anything. And I just want to tell you, I really appreciate the positivity and stuff that you put out so often. And that really got me. I actually said to him on there, I was really grateful for that, because I find that's the case. I do publish and put out a lot, but you don't always hear. I might find out years later, people watch that, but I don't always hear straight away. And it's just nice to know that people are getting something from all that content going out. So thanks, Nick, for that. Ryan McGrath, who was an absolute champion, because I actually needed, even with social distancing, we respected social distancing, but I needed physical help on Tuesday with a couple of things. And Ryan stepped up to the plate. He lives just near me, but he came over and helped me with that, whilst respecting social distancing, I hasten to add. Randall Killip, who consults and worked me on PR. This has been a difficult few months with the bushfires into Corona and writing for media. Anybody who writes for media, know how fickle it can be. And, we got so many angles and stories sitting up there. And sometimes it's very testing on patience. As a writer, you write pieces, somebody going to lock it in, they hold on it, they sit on it for weeks and weeks, and you could be doing something else with it. And that's sometimes a little frustrating when you're trying to get traction. But Randall, thank you very much for everything you do. And on that note, we got a really nice piece up. So I use that. I use my experiences and write about them. My selfies are in the words of my articles, the pages of my books, or my creativity I think I put out. And Newscom, across all their mastheads, published a really nice piece, solid piece on isolation that I'm very grateful that they published it, but Randall for working to get that one up as well. So, it's mostly people in my personal circle. One final one, Fletch, Optus with Ellie, because they went above and beyond. And in fact, we might get Fletch on. I think Ellie's going to have a chat with me. We might get Fletch on because he's a bit of a tech head and he can definitely add some insight. But I had some challenges with that, and they went above and beyond just to make sure I'm still being as best I can connected in the digital world. So a few people there.
Is then like a Chevy Chase type character with.
You know what? I've actually still to meet. I've still got to meet Fletch. Basically, we've spoken and stuff because he works with Ellie, but I've got to meet him. I'm looking forward to meeting him and the team after this. I'll probably take a trip down. I think Ellie. I know I've been talking about it. I'll do a trip. Don't worry, we'll get that. But we'll all meet Fletch first. If we get him on, if we agrees, we'll get him on to one of these sessions anyway. Prior, I've got a couple ideas in mind. Nice. So quite a lot of gratitude there this week. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for you, Chris, as well, for being able to stay somewhat coherent when you wanted to drift off with the fairies and missed your paint tab.
My screen's a little blurry, so if I was drooling from the oxy, I apologize. Yeah.
Now, on that note, so again, I'm mindful of time. So we're going to have our normal Tuesday, which is the more polished session. And on Tuesday, we're going to pick up and keep that theme of tech. We've got a couple of people in mind. We might have one, maybe two drop-ins, but we're definitely going to do another session on tech. Then we'll give it a break for a week. There's a few other topics that have come up, but definitely we're going to start looking more in that tech space and aligned with something Chris just flagged, which is productivity and efficiencies. And that's the slant we're going to take with the tech talk that we'll have on Tuesday. We'll have guests that drop in on that. So on that note, any final words of wisdom and parting words for you for our pajama party tonight, mate? Before I'm just while you're doing that, I'm going to get ready to do my Assassin's Creed ninja run around my local areas.
We look like we should be smashing the window of a 7-Eleven.
Final words of wisdom for you, Chris.
Final words of wisdom. Look, we're waiting for the announcement on Monday from Daniel Andrews. I've had so many conversations with people in regards to is he doing a good job or not. Everyone wants to have an opinion on that. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, remind everyone, be careful what you ask for; it might come true. The reason why we're in the position that we are, we've done very well as a state, has been because of that conservative approach. Just because the restrictions come off doesn't mean we all need to race out there and be stupid. So I think just a little bit of measure. We know pretty confidently that tomorrow there's going to be some announcements that start to ease the restrictions. So I just remind everyone to be safe. The second phase of the Spanish flu was the worst phase of all. And I know it's not the same, but I'd hate to see the same thing happen if we don't do the right thing. So hoping everyone keeps their measured approach to everything, and regardless of the announcement tomorrow, continues to stay safe. Yeah,
it's a good point. And these governments and politicians are dealing with massive crises. It's not just been one; it's been a string of them, and you have to react quickly to get some traction. And that means you're not always going to get it exactly right. You're not going to please everybody, And whilst there's been some potential errors or things we can go, maybe they'll look at it better. I'm sure they look in a mirror; they might see that themselves. But I agree with you. I think there's been some really good things and good actions, and we're doing pretty well in the scheme of things, I think. Anyway, I'll put my hood back up because I don't want to get caught in that. I'm going to get ready to go and play and I'll do an Assassin's Creed late night run around my local areas just to, there's nobody there. I have a bit of fun. Chris, great to see you, mate. I'm glad you're in good spirits despite your ankle. I'm looking forward to Tuesday's Polished Talk, my friend.
Fantastic. Talk to you then, mate. Cheers,
see you, mate.